I'm Oli Patrick, and this is the podcast that helps you understand your health by focusing on one thing, your energy. Because if you've got energy, you can live fully. Each week, we explore a different part of health, from sleep and stress to food, movement, and mindset, and how it affects the way you feel, think, and live. Let's dive in. Welcome to The Energy Equation, the podcast that helps you take control of your health by focusing on one powerful question. How do I get more energy to live fully? I'm Oli Patrick, and today's conversation is all about the tech in our pockets, on our wrists, and increasingly, inside our bodies. Here's a truth. Tech can either drain us or potentially supercharge us. Our guest today is Lara Lewington, tech journalist, broadcaster, and author of Hacking Humanity: How Technology Can Save Your Health and Your Life. Lara has spent years interviewing world-leading scientists, futurists, and thinkers at the cutting edge of human health and technology. Now, before we jump in, if this conversation does resonate with you, hit follow and share it with someone. Lara, it's a delight to have you on The Energy Equation.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
We're going to dive into all things tech, energy, you. But, I've followed you for years. You are deeply immersed in the intersection between technology and health. As a sort of, easy starter, are our devices draining us or enabling us from an energy point of view?
Oh, it's a big question. I think our devices do so much, they're doing a bit of both. I'm a tech optimist, so obviously I want to err towards the positive things that they can do for us, which is a lot of what we're going to discuss today. But of course, at the same time, they are taking too much of our time and energy. People are using them too close to bedtime. They bring with them a lot of issues, but I am that tech optimist who still wants to err on the positive side.
I love tech optimist. That's actually a new phrase. And so many people are negative around technology. What do you think the biggest misconception the average person has around the role of technology and health and energy?
Well, I think the biggest thing is probably the fear of AI not being scared of the right things.
Yes. Yes.
People seem very concerned that humanoid robots are going to take over or something similar, and I don't actually think that's the main concern right now. Bias, disinformation, cyber war, yes, absolutely things to worry about. We could spend the entire day talking about the concerns over AI, but I wanted to write a book on the positive side of it because I actually think there is enormous power to better our lives and the bodies that we live in.
Yeah, and you cover AI a lot in the book, and you've been through your reporting, sort of at the bleeding edge of where AI is being used. For those people who've got just no understanding of AI in health, can you give an example of how it might work in one sort of contextual example?
Yeah, absolutely. AI is nothing new, and I think that's something important to recognise here. It's been around for a long time, and it has the incredible ability to recognise patterns. So when it comes to health, it can be used in a hospital setting. It might be used as an extra pair of eyes on a scan to be able to identify tumours. It could be used by doctors to help them write notes in an appointment so they can concentrate on the patient.
Yes.
Or it could even be used to look at someone's face to recognise the signs of depression and be able to quantify it in a way that no human ever could. So there are so many different applications. AI is so many different things.
So many things. And that last one, have you seen that in action?
I have seen it in action, and it's been in trials in the NHS recently as well. There is so much that's becoming possible, so much that is beyond what any human could do. The ability to be able to pull in lifestyle data, genetic data, our understanding of disease, all of the information from our wearables. We're unearthing connections that nobody has ever been able to do before. And this is only going to become more and more possible. And this is where we start to head to a place where we're able to better predict disease. And if we can predict it, it becomes increasingly possible to be able to prevent it.
And this is why you are the tech optimist.
Indeed.
Which is great. And
Indeed. It's not without evidence.
No, but you've been collecting evidence for ages.
I have.
And when you've looked at AI, that sort of example of my facial expression, predicting a potential psychological disorder, what's the sort of the coolest bit of AI that you've encountered?
Oh, there is so much. I think the pattern recognition that we can see by collecting data on ourselves from our wearables, say, long term, to understand any changes in our health and where that's going.
Yeah.
That is probably one of the things I am most excited about here. There is so much that's becoming possible, so much change that's happening. I think it's impossible to specify one thing. In the area of cancer, there are incredible things happening.
Yes.
There's so much, but recognizing our own patterns and understanding from our own behaviour and those readings we can have ourselves, whilst they're not medical devices, in the future, we're just going to be able to understand more and more about, are we tired or are we getting ill? Is there a change in pattern here that we should really worry about? Or did I just not sleep very well last week? Those long-term patterns, that's really important and really exciting.
I love that. And my background of health assessments, people used to ask, what is the best screening test? And I'd be very clear to say it was pattern recognition.
Yeah.
When a pattern changes, and we're maybe not so good at observing those patterns in ourselves. So
absolutely, humans don't recognise small changes either.
No.
And the fact that you can really quantify things long term, but that's it. I think it's that generally which is exciting, rather than one particular test or one particular technology. I
think that's a good answer. I'm going to let you off with that one. So we spend a lot of time on the energy equation, looking at some of the sort of big foundational blocks of energy production. We talk about sleep, we talk about stress, we talk about fitness. Now, in your journey through the world of tech, I'm interested in your take on those three areas. So looking probably first at the area of sleep, where have you seen intelligent technology that might support people to get better sleep or better understanding of sleep?
Yeah, it's been really interesting because over the years, I've done many different features on sleep for many different programs. It's a topic that is really easily picked up on. And the thing I've noticed is when I've tested devices that are meant to be good for insomniacs, they stop me sleeping. And I'm not an insomniac in the first place. Now, this is obviously because I'm testing them for television and I'm determined if it involves an earbud, that earbud mustn't fall out. If it's a hairband, it must stay in place. Or a headband, something that you wear around here, I once did, it needs to stay in place or I'm not going to be able to give a full review afterwards. So I'm not quite sure whether I've done a terrible test with them sometimes, or whether the fact is this is what people genuinely do, because to some extent I am just a normal person not in a sleep lab testing these devices.
Yes.
So maybe anyone has these concerns about a headphone falling out or that headband coming off. In terms of tracking our sleep, this is something which over the years the devices have got a lot better at. Now, going back 10 years, all of these devices, I remember doing an experiment with 4 of the leading ones at the time, they came up with fairly different results back then. And with our activity, there was about a 25% discrepancy between the one that thought I'd walked the most and walked the least. One thought I burnt 3,000 more calories than another in a week.
Wow.
And also those sleep results were all out of kilter.
Yeah.
I did a similar test about 2 years ago, and the differences between devices were pretty negligible. But for the sleep element, they still were a little bit further out than they were for heart rate or for exercise.
Yes.
And a more recent test I did with the Aura and the Whoop actually had the figures precisely right with the same number of minutes of REM, which quite surprised me.
Incredible.
That it was actually to that level of detail. But
and that's a study on you rather than a study of a collection of people?
That's right. So this is my very non-scientific experiment.
It's still science.
It's to some extent. So I found this interesting that the devices have definitely got more accurate, maybe when it comes to sleep. And the other thing is one of them could be doing it precisely, but I'm not testing them in a sleep clinic, so I don't know if one of them is.
Yeah.
But what I think is the crucial takeaway from all of this is you can track yourself constantly and you can see the patterns in your sleep. And actually, going back to 10 years ago when I did that original trial with things not matching up at all, someone from one of the companies said to me it was the greatest PR line I'd ever heard. Well, it's consistently inconsistent, so you can test you against yourself.
I love that.
It's a brilliant get out, but there is also an element of truth in it, especially now as they have got more reliable. But the thing that has also been collected from this data at a population level, because there are millions of people using these devices, are some really interesting patterns in sleep. Now, it seems in Asia, people are having far less sleep than they are in Europe. In New Zealand, they're having the most sleep in the world. This is some Aura data which has shown this. And also the patterns of when people sleep. So in Europe, people are more likely to sleep in at the weekend than they are in parts of Asia. Also in Japan, if you fall asleep at work, it's considered a marker of hard work.
Yes.
Whereas you fall asleep in the UK, you're likely to get your P45.
Absolutely right. That's one of the many reasons I love Japan.
Well,
I'm telling you now.
A nice nap in the middle of the day. And siestas in Spain are normal, of course.
Yeah.
So I think what we learn about culture and about sleep and about our habits from around the world is really interesting here as well. So it's interesting at a population level as well as at a personal level. But one of the really interesting things that you see from tracking your own sleep, depending which device you're using, is the recommendation of what time you might want to go to bed at night.
Yes.
And I know people, particularly in California, who set their alarm clocks to go to sleep rather than to get up in the morning because they want to make sure they're getting the right amount of sleep at the right time. And because this tracking is recognizing at what point you are, at what time you're at what point in your sleep cycle,
Yes.
it's trying to help you go to sleep at the right time within that as well. So you're sleeping at the right time for your body, not just getting the right amount of sleep.
Yes.
And your wearables help you with all of that. So I think there's a lot we can learn from tracking our sleep. The devices that are meant to help you sleep, I personally haven't had such luck with, but it's not to say other people don't. Those snoring pillows, for example, that move up, they track your snoring,
Yes.
move up and down to try and stop the
Yes.
snoring. It probably really helps the person you share the bed with.
Yeah. I agree. And I think what you raised there, which is really interesting, and you raise it quite often in your book, is that you may not need the technology yourself, but the cascading benefit to a population might be of benefit. Can you just explore that a little bit?
Yeah, I think that's really important because one of the questions I often get asked is this technology not just for the wealthy? Are we not just going to make the wealthy healthier?
Yeah.
And look, of course, there is a risk that can happen. But there are also many things in place here. There are many people working at democratising access to this. Even the government's 10-year UK health plan. In 10 years' time, they want to be seeing wearables given to people who are leaving hospital after acute treatment, who have chronic health conditions for preventative purposes. So giving access to wearables is something that is being considered at that sort of level. There was also someone I spoke to for the book who talked about providing biological aging tests at supermarket level. And longer term, once these tests become better and cheaper, the idea is potentially they could be available for a few pounds at the checkout, and people would then do tests to understand more about their health, be given some feedback as to what might need to be improved, and then be given a few pounds back as a voucher to get the money back to spend.
Yeah.
And this is to make sure that there's adherence to the test because it will encourage people to actually do them. But also it was likened to the idea of lateral flow tests that was subsidised for the greater good of the population health.
Yeah, makes total sense. And I think, again, before I get onto the other areas of energy, I'm interested because your book, you're really looking at the future. You spend a lot of
Very
time
much so.
with futurists.
Yeah.
Then the 10-year NHS plan came out.
Yeah, just the week before the book came out.
Before the book. How did that, the government 10-year plan for the NHS marry up with what you're seeing in terms of those futurists and predictions?
So much. It was music to my ears because what I've got in the book is very much about what's technologically possible. I also talk about, look, these are the challenges about why we may struggle to get there, but actually, bigger picture, this is needed. We have a problem right now.
Yep.
In England, a high-income country with a National Health Service, women are spending 25% of their lives in poor health. For men, that's 20%. We need a solution to close that gap on health span and lifespan. Well, actually, technology can do a lot of that. And AI and technology are the drivers for a lot of what's possible. But the book is not a technical look at all of that. It's the human story. It's what you can do to help yourself. It's what this means for you. And when it comes to the government's plan, well, I hope my book actually helps make sense of what some of this stuff is, because we often hear it described at a sort of top level, AI is going to do this. Well, what is the AI actually going to do for you and me? Well, it's going to be able to pull in all of this genetic and lifestyle and disease data, and it's going to be able to find out why people are getting cancer in their 30s and 40s, not just who's at risk of cancer, but when and why. And what happens when we all have our genome sequenced? How and when is that going to become useful? Well, right now, it's got limited use for most people. Long term, it will become incredibly important to understand what drugs are going to work on you, what side effects they're likely to have. And so the book pulls together this bigger picture of our long-term health. And the 10-year plan is, of course, very specifically saying this time period is 10 years. I'm talking about, well, in the coming years, the coming decades, because there's a lot of stuff there. I can't be specific about what year everything's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it is absolutely a direction of travel. And it's really, really important that people understand what this means for them, what handing over their data means, what they can gain from it, and why it's important to them.
Yeah, I get that entirely. And I think one thing you mentioned in there was health span and lifespan.
Yeah.
Just for those who aren't as au fait with this, how would you distinguish between those two things?
Well, our health span is the healthy years of our lives. Many of us are spending years, if not decades, in decline and really suffering in older age. We want to increase health span. There are many people out there who are obsessed with the idea of wanting to live longer, and that's something I've really tried to stay away from, although there's a 103-year-old Mildred who I may go into in a minute.
I've spent years helping people understand what really fuels their energy. And when it comes to daily nutrition, Vitals by Heights is where I start. Most of us still fall short on those key nutrients that support energy, focus, and mood. And that's where Vitals comes in. This is what a modern multivitamin should be. It's advanced, it's absorbable, and it's actually effective. It includes not just the basics, but 20 essential nutrients, including omega-3s and B vitamins, which are vital for brain health and energy metabolism. What sets it apart and why I love it is the science. It's formulated by doctors and dietitians, and it's backed by thousands of studies. It's clinically proven to work. It's built for long-term impact, not just short-term spikes. And as someone who reads the research and feels the results, I believe deeply in this. In fact, I believe in this product so much, I've joined the Heights team as their Chief Energy Officer because I believe they're setting a new standard in supplementation. If you're ready to kickstart your energy journey, start with Vitals. Get 20% off your first month at heights.com/EE or use the code EE20 at checkout.
But I think the real picture here is we want to live our lives in a healthy, happy way, full of energy,
Yes.
full of all of the things that fulfill us day in, day out for as long as possible. We want to avoid disease and we want to be able to enjoy life. We don't want to spend years feeling 80. We want to spend years feeling 40.
And that's such a great description. I think that's where we find energy meeting, is that sense of whenever we speak about longevity or lifespan, people get confused and they see images of people living many years, as you say, 25, 20 years in ill health, poor quality. Having high energy, high combustibility in those later years is much of what you're really referring to.
Absolutely.
With the technologies involved.
And there's a lot we can do to help ourselves. And we know the idea of exercise, sleep, eating healthily being good. But what technology does for that is it helps us quantify not just what we're doing, but the impact it's having on our bodies. Because it's easy for us to log how we think we're feeling. But actually, those readings are really important because our state of mind can really affect how we are or aren't feeling. And sometimes you wake up in the morning, don't feel like you've got the energy to do anything. Then you go and have a workout and you feel fantastic. So it's good to actually be able to quantify in an objective way. And the technology really helps us be able to do that.
I think so. I think, when we look at the global well-being trends, we see hyper-personalisation as one of the fastest growing areas. People want their version.
Absolutely, because we're all different.
Yeah, and from wearing all the sleep monitors, I'm still on sleep. Have you made any changes as a result of monitoring or anything that you've deployed practically?
Well, I open the app to my smart ring in the evening and I will see that it's within the window I should be going to bed. And my husband may be saying, shall we watch another episode of whatever it is that's on the telly? And I'm sort of looking at that, looking at the TV and deliberating. And then I still go back and watch TV and don't follow it. Because that's the reality. We all have lives to live. We have families, we have relationships, we have jobs. Lots of people work shifts. They don't have the luxury of being able to follow a sleep pattern perfectly.
Yes.
So the knowledge is useful, but we are only going to take it as far as is convenient. Not everyone's going to follow it religiously, and I know that.
And I love that. It's informed choice, though.
Yeah, it is. It's informed choice, and I think that's important. You've got the knowledge and you make a decision to break the rules.
Love it. So sleep, we're again, I would align fans of wearables used appropriately for informed choice making. That's great. The other area we look at a lot on this program is stress management or recovery. Any technologies you've seen in that space that are of value?
Well, our trackers can do so much for all of this. The stress tracking works in different ways. Some of them are literally testing for moisture on the skin. Some are looking at patterns in heart rate. There is huge variety in how you track it. I used to have a function on my Apple Watch, actually, that would sometimes tell me to breathe. And I found it rather patronising and annoying. But I would realise each time it did it, I was sort of in thought, holding my breath. So it was obviously a thing, but I don't know. There's different ways of tracking this, and I'm not massively convinced by how useful I find anything on the wearables. There are now these saliva tests that you can do to track cortisol levels a couple of days a month. You'll do a few samples throughout the day to see your cortisol curve and how that's going. And for people who are particularly worried about stress and the impact of chronic stress on their bodies, these things are going to become increasingly useful, I think.
And that's the great thing about DNA testing. In fact, we are running DNA testing on our guests through Stride to try and understand some of these small adaptations in their genome that can help them hyper-personalize their lifestyle. So that's a really exciting development for us. the cortisol is interesting because, if I look on TikTok, and I'm infrequently on TikTok, things like cortisol face and cortisol belly, and cortisol's become this real demonized element, and people have to take things to the extreme. So I think on one level, for me, tracking gives a greater clarity of that individual sense. Most people actually in the morning are waking up, they've probably got too little cortisol because they're not getting enough first morning light, or they're not appropriately running a normal 24-hour clock with darkness in the evening, consistent waking times. So I think that there's some value there. I like the heart rate variability tracking. The one we wear, or some of our guests wear to track their sleep and recovery. I think we've spoken with other experts about that inability to switch off, and I think people don't realize what that is. This sort of sense, and often people think a busy brain is a busy brain, but a busy brain also means a busy body.
Yeah.
And that comes at that loss of physiology. So these devices that we both champion that measure things like heart rate variability can give that sense of, am I physically able to switch off? And if I'm not, the question then is what do you do with that information? And if you're being told that your body battery is low, or that you have had inadequate recovery, or whatever terminology that device uses, I think there's still a lack of clarity on what you do with that.
Yeah, indeed, because it can involve quite a lot of lifestyle change that isn't necessarily possible. But again, I suppose it's giving you that information. And information is useful to people as long as it doesn't make them more stressed or more worried.
And that's the great challenge. And again, it comes back to your point that if you are someone who's going to be more stressed, more worried by the tech, maybe don't use it. But those groups using it are casting that knowledge across. I know certainly from Whoop, they've produced journals saying sleep consistency is now of equal value to sleep duration. And we've got that from the people wearing it, that benefits to those of us who aren't necessarily wearing it. So, and that's a piece I love, that democratization of a few people who are early adopters. You don't have to be one of them to still get some of the benefit here.
Absolutely, because we're learning things we could never learn before without this wearable data, and that's absolutely fascinating.
Agreed. And from a movement point of view, so you noted earlier that there's some good evidence on the movement quality. How have you seen technology that either measures or enhances movement playing a role in the future?
Well, the devices are, of course, only going to get better and probably measure more and more things. But it's things like air quality data, for example, being brought into the mix. There are so many different elements of our lives that can be included in this. There was a Stanford professor who was really interesting, who I filmed with a couple of years ago, who always wears 7 devices, including an air quality monitor. And in a small study that he'd done, he'd been able to identify signs of respiratory disease, including asymptomatic COVID, days before anything would have shown up. So there's definitely this recognition of patterns that is going to become better and better. And he was using numerous devices in his tests, but we'll start to see more and more from just the one device that most of us probably wear. I wear more than one. Maybe you do as well. Do you?
I do. I wear one all the time.
Okay.
And then I bolt on it additional ones.
Right. I like the bolt on idea. That's a great phrase for it.
Yeah, when I feel like there's either a change in behaviour, or there's a change in my symptomology.
Yeah.
And I would like to understand where one equals the other. A good example would be continuous glucose monitors.
Yes.
And you spend a lot of time with them.
Yeah.
What's the sort of current thinking around those?
I tested a continuous glucose monitor for 2 weeks, and I think on this first experiment I did with it, I learned most of what I needed to know. Now, I was testing one that you wear in the arm and also a watch that claimed to do the same using an algorithm. The findings, just looking at the blood sugar, ignoring the comparison between the two devices, were interesting to me.
Yeah.
Because my biggest spike I ever had was the vegetable juice I was having before lunch. So on an empty stomach, I was having a pretty hardcore vegetable juice. There was no fruit in this. There was no apple. There was no cheating going on.
Yeah, and you're making this yourself. So
I was on holiday when I did this, and I was having the juice at lunchtime after a big workout. And in the evenings after dinner, I was having an ice cream often on a walk back. Now, I'm telling you this very specific information for a good reason. Because the vegetable juice was giving me the biggest spike of the day by a long way, whereas the ice cream that I was having whilst walking after my dinner wasn't taking me out of range.
Love it.
Now, I could come away from this thinking, great, Ice cream's really good for you. But I know it's not, because I know there's so much more to this. It's about the order that you eat food. It's about the movement that you're having. It's what you have on an empty stomach and the impact that has. And because I was reading a book on blood sugar at the same time, I was actually picking up quite a lot of the information from the book on what you should and shouldn't do. Now, I wasn't necessarily following those rules, as you can tell from my behaviour in general, and also the fact that I was having those spikes from vegetable juice. But my really interesting takeaway, and I did then actually in the coming days try different things because I wanted to get a true representation of the way that I ate and what I did and the best that I could test things. But what I did discover was you can keep within this sort of sensible range that it gives you, having something like some ice cream after dinner. And other people I spoke to who were also doing tests like this were trying to keep it as steady as possible, the line. And I was saying, well, no, you're going to have some fluctuation in your blood sugar. That's normal. The idea is you don't want huge spikes.
Yes.
I was actually having more dips than I was spikes.
Which is really relevant from an energy point of view, because those low dips are normally associated. So when you've got low blood glucose, the brain in particular can feel a bit starved of fuel and a bit of a brain fog. So the dips probably are more relevant from an energy point of view than the spikes.
I also noticed when I exercised, my blood sugar was going up. And I think that was down to the stress of exercise.
A beautiful response. So as your body recognizes more movement, it releases some of the stored glucose and it rises. So again, that is a normal response, but an interesting observation.
Yeah. So I thought after 2 weeks, I'd made some interesting findings. I'd read this book at the same time. So I'd learnt the general picture of what was good to do and not to do. I'd also learnt a little bit about the personalisation. And the personalisation element isn't just about the fact that our bodies are different. It's also that our habits are different. And you read a book and it doesn't cater for that person who has juice before their lunch. It doesn't cater for the things that each and every one of us does. I did a test again after that. I spent another 2 weeks wearing one at home where I was following different habits. And I kind of didn't really learn anything extra on top. I wanted to do it when I was in my more daily routine as well. But my feeling was, as someone who's healthy and a non-diabetic, and I eat pretty well, I was doing okay. And following my blood sugar more often than that, I wasn't going to gain a huge amount.
That's such a great insight because, again, there's no... Clearly, these were technologies designed for people with type 2 diabetes or type 1 diabetes where they can't stop the levels of glucose rising up too high.
Yeah, or who are pre-diabetic. And at that point, it's really useful.
Agreed.
And it is really useful for a lot of people. But for somebody who's living as healthily as I am, I think it was a great experiment. It was really interesting. Very glad I did it once. Second time, I probably just did it to check that I agreed with what I found the first time. And also, this is my job. I was testing a different platform and I wanted to know what that platform was like as well. And I end up testing loads of things and testing myself time and time again in a way that nobody would ever need to. But it's to learn. The interfaces are different. The information you get back, the way that data is presented to you is different. And it's a really important part of the experience. If I'm talking about what I think worked well for me, and when people are asking me to review something or what would be good for them, it's an important part of the picture, how that data is presented to you, because people don't always understand the data that well, especially when it can be fairly complex health data that's trying to be presented in a fairly simple way. And also, people don't always understand risk.
Yes.
And so there's quite a lot that you need to demystify about this data. So I like to look at the way it's presented by all companies.
I think that's brilliant. And that sums up that tech brilliantly. You've now got me thinking, what's the worst bit of tech that you've ever tested? Is there anything you've tested?
There's been plenty of things that just haven't worked.
Well, has there been any awkward? Because, whenever someone demos tech, it generally goes wrong.
Yeah.
What was the most useless thing that you tested in terms of made no sense? Because people are making tech for the purpose of making tech.
Oh, yeah, completely.
And much of this must come across your desk.
Yes, the best one was a care robot at a university in the Netherlands, which had been working brilliantly all morning. And it was kind of taking trays around to this fake hospital room. And it was a long time ago now. So it was quite an early iteration of this kind of thing. It worked really well. But in the afternoon, the press had all arrived. The room was full. And of course, there were so many people there that the Wi-Fi signal went down and the robot couldn't function without Wi-Fi. And so you've got a brilliant setup. You've got a humanoid robot that can pick up the tray. I mean, whether a humanoid robot is the right thing in this scenario is a whole other conversation. But the thing that failed was the Wi-Fi connection. And this is the sort of thing I've witnessed for years. Never film with children, animals, or technology.
I could not agree more. I've been in some of those demos and they are brutal. And I think, within that sense, does that sort of lean into the worry that we've got that if we automate key things, because there's a sense that in the medical sphere, we're going to replace certain jobs, but that makes us more vulnerable to these tech failures.
Well, there are so many dimensions to this very good question. And I think the most important point here is that all of the technology that we're looking at now, everything that's being developed and accelerated, is all about augmenting doctors, allowing doctors to do the most important human bits. Also, helping healthcare become more efficient and better. We have massive waiting lists right now. We have problems with people getting access to what they want. And that's just in this country, what they need, not what they want. And around the world, getting access to better healthcare is so important.
I want to take a moment to thank our partners for this season of The Energy Equation, Stride One. They're not just sponsoring the show, they're helping bring it to life in a really exciting way. The guests you hear from this season have been tested using Stride's platform, looking into things like their DNA, their gut, their blood. And this means we can actually see a blueprint of their internal health and start to connect the dots between how they live and how they function. And the reason we've partnered with Stride is simple. We trust them. There's no gimmicks here, no guesswork, real, science-led insights into what drives energy, recovery, focus, and longevity from the inside out. If you've ever wanted to understand your body like this, to go beyond those surface metrics and get real clarity, I honestly can't recommend Stride One enough. You can get a special offer on the exact same test I've used and that our guests are using by heading to getstride.com/energy or just check the link in the description.
And AI and technology are making this more possible. And so looking at what's being automated or what AI is becoming involved in, it's really important to actually debunk what's going on here.
Yes.
Because within scans looking for tumours, for example, we're talking about an extra pair of eyes.
Yes.
There are still 2 radiologists looking at that scan. This is a 3rd pair of eyes that might see something that a human hasn't.
Yeah.
Now, of course, longer term, we wonder how much responsibility is going to get handed over to the tech. And we have to think really carefully about how that's regulated and what is permitted. Because even if technology makes fewer mistakes than humans will, people will be less accepting of it. And it'll also make different mistakes to those that humans would, like with self-driving cars. So there are a lot of questions to be asked when we look at this long term. If we go back to the idea of something like robots, which is incredibly emotive for people, well, in Japan, there's an example where you've got an aging population in a country where robotics are embraced so much more. So robots in the care setting were more common. But what happened is they cut back on the number of carers needed, but the robots kept going wrong. So they needed to employ just as many people to keep the robots functioning as they had done carers in the first place. Now, this is not going to be the example of everything within healthcare where we automate or bring in AI.
Yes.
But it is a reality that these systems are not going to run flawlessly on their own. And what we want to do is we want to engage with technology to make healthcare and our health better, to optimize what we can do, to optimize what medics can do, not actually to take over and the technology be doing that job. And I really hope that people can gain some confidence in this idea, because there's incredible power there, but we need to understand what it is. We need to understand what it means to hand over our data. To who? To what ends? Who owns it? Who's profiting from it? What benefit do we get to it? What benefit does the general population get from it?
Yeah.
These are all really important questions that I don't think most people know the answers to right now.
Yes.
And there's a lot that's going to unfold over the years, but there's enormous sensitivity to the big tech companies, to what we're handing over to them. It's a really exciting and better future that we can have if we approach it correctly.
I'm on board with that. I think that tech optimism is infectious, but I think you're mapping out a vision here. When we come back to that concept of energy, that if we have the legwork automated by AI engines, then we're having better physical time talking with real human beings about the things that matter.
Absolutely. And the machines have consistent energy as long as they've been charged, so they don't get tired at the end of a day at work. And there are so many other reasons why we should be embracing technology and we should be willing to bring it in, that it can do things in a uniform way time and time again. Many might say that also brings the risk. It's a way of scaling things when something goes wrong, yes, but actually it is also in this context a way of keeping on going without getting tired, without needing to finish their shift.
Yes, go spot on. Now, one area that we always align on is we both love a bit of a DNA test.
Yes.
Well, and so I think you've probably run more than I have.
How many have you done?
I reckon I've done 5.
Oh, okay. I'm not sure that I'm ahead of 5, actually.
Well, and the irony of that is, of course, your DNA never changes.
Exactly. So, I know. Why do we keep doing it? What on earth do we think? For different companies. So clearly you are as happy to hand over your DNA to anyone asking as I am.
Literally, drop of a hat. And I think probably let's start with that because, before we get into the DNA and is there any energy in our DNA, why would we think about testing it in the first place?
Long-term, DNA sequencing, I think, is going to be incredibly powerful. It's already very powerful for certain people. Genomics England is testing the genome of some newborn babies who are at high risk of rare diseases. Rare diseases, each one of them is rare, but it's actually fairly common to have a rare disease.
Yeah.
And some of these diseases can, for example, cause blindness if they're not treated early. So it's been shown that there have been some incredible results from what they've been doing, and it's a really meaningful project. And in the next 10 years, in the UK, we may be seeing all newborn babies having their genome sequenced. But what's important here is the actionable insights.
Yes.
There's so much, as you know, of this data, which is stuff we don't know about yet.
Yes.
So how useful is it for a general member of the public to be given the data on their fully sequenced genome?
Yeah.
Right now, I think it's probably of pretty limited use. There are a few things that are known, but even those few things could send them into unnecessary panic if they don't really understand the context of risk, the impact of lifestyle. And one expert said to me that we should probably be going with the grain of the healthcare system that we're in. Because if somebody gets into a panic over something they found, first of all, the healthcare system can't cater for people going off and doing all these tests themselves and coming back with results that are causing them a lot of worry.
Yes.
But also, it's really early days for this. Yet longer term, we're going to be able to know what medicines people can and can't take. We're going to understand their risk a lot better by looking at the combination of their genes. And so great power long term, but right now, I think it's really interesting, but limited. How do you feel having done 5 tests?
Well, I agree. Again, I think, we're learning every day. As the sequencing gets cheaper and the studies roll out, we sort of had that original, you and I were both, would have been aware of the original 23andMe, which maybe put DNA through the lens of I'm going to tell you which diseases you're going to get. And of course, it wasn't intelligent or accurate enough to tell that. So it created this huge false alarm and then managed to leak everyone's data, which was an absolute blow.
It was a third party that had a password theft, which allowed access. And then they did their 2-factor authentication. But sadly, it was too late because unlike your bank details, you can't change your DNA. So a lot of people were left very unhappy, and we saw the damage that did.
Enormous. And so, that's a credibility piece, and that plays into the public psyche.
It really does. And I think that there were big questions before that already in terms of how people felt. And what happened goes to show that it's not just about trusting the company to be safely keeping hold of your DNA data. It's actually these other elements. The reusing of passwords we know we shouldn't do, but most of us do it.
Yes.
Like we know we should sleep perfectly, but we don't do it. We're humans. We're only human and we don't behave perfectly. We always want to blame the AI and the machines.
and I think that bit created a healthy skepticism. Who's got my data? What are they doing with it? But I think the disease forecasting piece was too early, too emotive and too inaccurate.
Really emotive, yeah, absolutely. And people weren't necessarily ready for it.
No. And I think that you alluded to another piece, which is if I'm going on chronic medication, within my genetic material, we may see certain medicines I process better or worse. So reducing risk of side effects and choosing which drug I go on. But that's the sort of field of pharmacogenomics, which is very aligned to those on chronic medications. And I think we'll hopefully see different versions of tablets brought out for different gene types, which is something that you'll be fully abreast of. I think the third area is which biological processes am I not so good at?
Yes.
And I think that bit is at a good place in terms of what am I, Oli Patrick, being given a bit of a set of armbands for in terms of swimming and a set of leg weights for. What biological process, and my relationship with certain nutrients, my body's ability to convert certain vitamins into hormones, my body's ability to do key biological processes that affect my daily life. I think that bit is in a place where it's usable and democratizable, and you've run those as well.
Yes, and I think for people who really want to optimize their health, the people who are at the fairly extreme end of this,
yes,
there is some useful stuff there if you're really going to care about the detail.
Yes.
I suppose I'm far more interested in a population level, more mainstream approach to it.
Yes.
So whilst I go around testing all of these things, I almost come away feeling less excited about the stuff at that highest end, because I want to know that this is going to make a difference for many people. But what is interesting about it, despite that, is a lot of what we can do now in terms of continuous glucose monitoring, even the activity tracking. This is stuff that was accessible for elite athletes before,
Yes.
and now it's becoming mainstream. And I suppose a lot of this filters down in a slightly more basic form, but people understanding that about their bodies. And I love the armband analogy and the weights on your ankles. It's great because it's good to know what we're good at, what our challenges are, and accept we don't all find everything that easy. I am a really unsporty person. I was the person at school no one wanted on their team. I'd be left over after everyone had called out the name of who they wanted, and they got me, and it'd be like, ugh. And I'd feel so bad that they were stuck with me, and then I'd be running away from the ball in netball instead of running towards it because I was scared it would hit me in the face. And I was absolutely terrible. And as an adult, I discovered running. And I realised that the good thing about running was nobody else was involved in it. It didn't matter that I was terrible. And even now, 25 years later, of running 5K most days, unless I've had a period where I've had an injury or something,
Amazing.
I don't do it particularly fast. I go running with friends who barely run. I can't go any faster than them. I'm still not particularly great, even after all these years.
Yes.
But I found the thing for me. And I think what's quite nice is for everybody to find the thing that works for them. So anything that can help guide them to that is useful.
I totally agree. And any other lifestyle changes you've made around, through understanding your genetic material?
Well, I am obsessed with coffee and caffeine's impact. Now, when I say I am obsessed with this, I love coffee and I have a double or triple espresso every morning. I don't have coffee later in the day, but I take it even more seriously than this.
Come on.
Now, I know how much our genetics can impact the effect that caffeine has on us, that we fall into one of these three categories. And I seem to be in the fortunate category where it has quite a nice buzzy effect. It doesn't make me too anxious or shaky, but it can be a useful tool to get through the day with the right energy levels.
Yes. So our genes break down caffeine, and some people are awful at breaking it down and they get all jittery. Others feel a bit buzzy, others sort of equivocal broadly.
Yeah.
And which one are you?
And I am definitely the category of can have it, has an effect, don't have it in the afternoon. But because it has this effect, I use it when I travel, and I've travelled a lot for work over the years,
Yeah.
and I will fly to the other side of the world and go straight out filming. I once had to fly to Seattle to interview a boss at Microsoft and then fly straight back. And so what I do is I carefully manage when I have that coffee. Now, my body is so used to it that if I don't have it, I get an absolute stonking headache and I am shaking.
Wow.
It is that bad.
And you just have that double, triple in the morning.
Yeah.
So if that
And
dose
that's
isn't
it.
there, you feel awful.
Exactly. So
Wow.
if I haven't had it by 11 or 12 o'clock, the symptoms start, stonking headache.
Yeah.
But I use this to my benefit because I will feel so bad I just want to fall asleep. So if I'm managing jet lag or going to fly somewhere where I need to film instantly the other side of the world, I will make sure that I don't have the caffeine, have to sleep because I feel so bad.
Genius.
Then so I'll fall asleep on the flight. Then when I get there, so say I've got to the US and I'm that 8 hours behind,
Yeah.
I then have the double or triple espresso when I get there,
Yeah.
and suddenly I'm wide awake and it's all good. So I don't know how good this is or isn't for your body. Some doctor's probably going to listen to this and say it's absolutely terrible.
No, they won't.
1 minute you're talking about sleep benefits, the next minute caffeine is a serious drug. But it works. It works for me. It gets me to the energy levels that I need. I'm not doing this every week. I'm doing this occasionally.
Yes.
And I feel like it manages switches in time zones, and I feel fairly good from it. So whether it's right or wrong,
I think
I'm happy.
It's great. It's a jet lag protocol.
It is.
And actually, we can use caffeine. Caffeine's a sort of false energy in the sense that it mimics or it targets one of our central nervous system and creates energy through that way. But it really hides how tired you are from your brain.
Yeah, which is lovely.
Which is brilliant. And so you're using it spot on perfectly.
Yeah.
The sort of rapid withdrawal piece would be interesting to link back to your genes.
Yeah.
And see how fast you metabolize the caffeine. But certainly that as a viable strategy. And this again comes to that hyper-personalization piece.
Yeah.
You've worked out how you can have the optimal dose of caffeine to have high energy in the day, but not impact your sleep in the evening.
Yeah, exactly. And I think about it because I feel like I'm quite sensitive to things that I consume. I don't have that much sugar. When I do, that makes me feel quite excited.
Yeah, you're one as well.
Whereas,
based on the vegetable juice spike
well,
in you.
yeah,
you're ready to rock.
exactly. So, yeah, that gave the game away, didn't it? So people who are eating chocolate bars all the time probably wouldn't have the effect that I'm getting from having a hot chocolate, and it feels terribly exciting. So whilst I think that I am the sort of healthy end of normal, maybe I am a little bit more extreme than I realise. I try not to consume too much sugar. I barely drink alcohol because I feel terrible the next day. The whole of the next day, I have no energy. I feel really flat. I'm just sort of waiting for the day to end.
Yeah.
And I don't want to waste a day like that. So that's why I don't really like drinking.
And have you tracked that through your sleep? Have you, with any of your sleep trackers, picked up your sensitivity to alcohol?
It's so rare I consume alcohol. It's maybe one drink every couple of years that I've never drunk enough to actually look at any proper patterns from it. But I just feel horrible the next day. And so I don't like to do it. And it's really as simple as that. But if I did look at the data, I'm sure I would actually find something saying, don't do it. The alarm bells would go off.
And it's great when you get that clear a symptom, just lots of people wouldn't notice it that overtly.
Yeah.
So that's a blessing. All of this tech is sort of plugging us in. You know, most of these devices are competing for our attention. Where do you see that intersection between the benefit of these technologies and the challenge to our mental health?
Tracking should be fairly seamless. And the ability to track even more down to, there was something I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show this year that was literally tracking the toilet when you used it in the morning.
Yeah, good.
And
tracking hydration or stool?
Yes, hydration and for UTIs. And so a bit like in the 1980s, you used to have down the toilet these sort of brightly coloured, sort of bleach in or something.
We definitely had one. You sort of, you'd deliberately pee on it in my house.
It would sort of look like that.
And it was it would clean the toilet all the time. But this is now measuring whether you've got urinary tract infection.
Yes, exactly. It's now taking various measurements. So when you have things like that, you have these wearables, you have devices like continuous glucose monitors for those that it is more important that they wear them, where you are seamlessly collecting enormous amounts of data.
Yeah.
And the seamlessness is important for people both to want to collect it and it also not become a stressful, annoying experience that people either don't want to do or don't have time to do.
Yes.
Now, how we approach the collection of that data will have an effect, because if you are obsessively going to check it, then it may be having a substantial impact on your life, and that could be negative. But if you are just collecting all this data in the background so it's there when you need it, which I would suggest is actually what I do, because I'm way more interested in long-term patterns than how many steps I did yesterday.
Yes.
I think it can be very useful and very important. And long-term, there will be even more that we can do seamlessly, that will become the norm to do seamlessly, that will be long-term data that we collect on ourselves.
Yes.
And I think it's possible to do a lot of this without it negatively impacting us. But it becomes about the right mindset. And ultimately, the way that AI and technology is becoming such an integral part of our lives means that our behaviour is going to change. It's going to change what it means to be human, what the human element of things to do are. And whilst this may sound absurd, you only have to look at the impact that smartphones have had on us. Even when you look at elderly relatives that are glued to them all the time, the fact we constantly feel drawn to them, we feel a need to check our emails, the duty to respond. If we haven't looked at it for half an hour, we're worried what we might have missed. And I don't think we can underestimate what AI is going to do in general in the future for our behaviour. So a lot of the questions we ask now about how we feel about collecting data, about the role technology plays, well, we are collecting data constantly through our wearables. There are facial recognition cameras everywhere collecting data on people. There's so much going on that we don't even think about, necessarily know about. So that data collection is happening.
Yes.
And our attitudes will change. So the conversations that we have now about how we feel about it are likely to change in 5 years, in 10 years.
Yeah.
And I just hope they go in the right way. And I hope that our data is looked after safely, sensibly. And in terms of healthcare data, privacy is at the core of these platforms where it needs to be. And if somebody wants to use a mental health chatbot, well, there are ones that have data and privacy built in because that's what they're for, yet there are also plenty of people going to Gemini or ChatGPT because they prefer the experience they're getting with a large language model where that privacy isn't built in. So we also need to understand how we use things safely and correctly as well.
That's really interesting. So you think a crucial piece of this, and not paraphrasing, would be that it's much reduction on negative impact on mental health when it's collected seamlessly in the background. You think it's people's sense of obsessively checking in with it that's causing the challenge, but if it's sort of latent, it takes away that element. And should we look at longer patterns of recognition?
I think
rather
it can
than
do.
Microcycles and microanalysis.
I think it can do. And I think those longer patterns are often where we spot something important.
Yeah.
So we also would get alerts if anything was wrong. And if we throw ahead to the future, well, whilst they're not medical devices, they may have some elements within them that are medical grade. We are going to start to see them recognise more signs of things being amiss, like atrial fibrillation is already being spotted through many devices, and people are then going to see doctors for a proper diagnosis.
Yes.
So I think there is a way of using these devices safely that they don't bother us more. But in terms of the point of our devices taking too much of our energy, well, we don't need to be constantly logging onto the devices to check this data, constantly looking at it. There's plenty of people are going to be using their devices for. They're going to be on social media. They're going to be looking online.
Yeah.
We all seem to be glued to them. That's a separate issue.
Yes.
But I don't think our health tech is necessarily going to be the thing driving that.
I love that take, Lara. That sort of, that let go of the day-to-day micromanagement, get those longer, more latent patterns of trends. And as you rightly say, those sort of aggregated trends could start to prompt us of the exact thing we need to do. Rather than at the moment, people are checking 7 different devices.
Yeah.
Then spending all their energy trying to work out what each one of those means when they're not talking to each other, and none of those outcomes are particularly well known. So that vision of more intuitive data collection, and I'm very happy to be on anything that's measuring my urine. But I'm happy for that latent collection, and again, third party observation of whether that trend matters or not. We were talking there about longevity. You did mention Mildred of 103 earlier, and I can't let that lie without knowing what's happened to Mildred.
So I went to interview Mildred in Loma Linda, a blue zone in California.
Oh, yes.
So one of the places in the world where people have longer than average life expectancy. Now, sadly, Mildred actually passed away a couple of months ago. But I went to film with her the same week that I went to film with Brian Johnson, the tech entrepreneur who wants to do everything to live forever. And the contrast in terms of the human story here was so interesting and so important. What do we want out of life? Well, even Brian Johnson wants to keep on living in a healthy state. He's certainly not planning on feeling 80 for 800 years or however long.
Yeah.
But Mildred's take was so interesting and so powerful because at 103 years of age, she had no disease. She was really sharp. She was of perfectly sound mind. But she had no feeling of purpose every day. And every time she stood up, she was nervous she was going to fall over because she wasn't feeling very strong. She was perfectly well by anyone's description, but she still was not enjoying day-to-day life. And she said to me, she doesn't recommend this age to anyone. Living into your hundreds, it's not great. She'd lost her daughter 30 years before. Her son was bedbound. She lives within a community where everybody knows each other and there's activities downstairs, there's singing, there's all sorts of things going on because this is a Seventh-day Adventist community where it's all about everything to improve your longevity.
Yeah.
The idea of exercise and healthy living is a duty of religiosity to them, and they all want to support each other. Yet even being in this environment, and you would think that this ticked pretty much all of the boxes that are there.
Yeah.
She had been a very successful woman. She'd set up hospitals in Uganda. She was a doctor. And she had all this African memorabilia around her apartment. And you could just feel that she didn't have the sense of purpose anymore. And when she woke up in the morning, she didn't look forward to the day in the way that she once did. And she had simply had enough. And it was really powerful because we came away from this and we just thought, I was with a cameraman who was brilliant. We'd had an amazing trip together because it was quite a deep and meaningful trip. We'd gone to film so many incredible things about how you could see depression on the brain and the impact that this had on people with depression and when it was treated. And we really came away with so many of these big questions about what we want out of life. And it really made me think about what health span even means because it's so much encapsulated within that. It's not just a lack of disease. It's actually feeling purpose, companionship, your sense of being that you feel at 40, everything that exists when you're younger will hopefully exist when you're younger, continuing to exist, and none of that slipping away that we want. And we had that versus Brian Johnson was doing anything to stay alive. And I always enjoy talking to Brian because it's absolutely fascinating. And he did say to me, he'll probably die an ironic death choking on a pill. And he does take a lot of them.
It's 155 a day, isn't it? I think.
A fair few.
Yeah.
But Mildred was really powerful. The community there in Loma Linda were brilliant. They were so welcoming. I learned so much from them, even what I now make for breakfast every day.
Which is
the perfect energy breakfast as far as they were concerned. I don't know if you'll agree with this, but it was porridge with chia seeds and nuts and a bit of fruit and lots of different seeds and toppings. So you had quite a variety.
beautiful.
It's amazing, and I do it every day ever since. But I'd always felt this sense of I shouldn't do it in the microwave. I should do it in a pan. And whenever I did it at home, it would all be stuck to the pan and there was scrubbing afterwards.
Yeah.
And that would put me off. That was not how I wanted to use the energy I got from it. But the lady there was putting it in the microwave, and I thought, if she puts it in the microwave in Loma Linda, I'm putting it in the microwave at home.
I think we could do a whole special on microwaves, but the general theme is microwaves are good for preparing food.
Yeah.
And that sounds like
no pan to scrub.
It sounds, and that sounds like a perfect, healthy energy breakfast. But that story is so good because, we're talking here about cutting edge technologies and AI and genes, and that's why the book Hacking Humanity sort of comes back to that piece again. What is the purpose of existing? And I certainly in previous lives have measured people who are physiologically intact and they optimized sleep and they optimized gut and they optimized their cardiorespiratory fitness and they optimized their hormone levels, but in aid of what? And that absence of social connection, that absence of dependency, codependency is a different type of exhaustion.
Yeah.
And we often talk about spiritual energy, which isn't, about faith or existence, more about that sense of purpose in manifest.
Yeah, and it's really important. And this is the way, I don't want to do a big spoiler here, the way the book ends. I mean, it comes back to the very human story of how we exist and how we feel about each other and how we feel about how much we engage with what we can do to better our health and lives, to what benefit and to what ends. Because we all want to live a healthier and happier life every day. We don't want to be miserable now thinking we're going to be healthier in the long term.
Yes.
Actually, there's a way of doing it all. There's a way of finding balance. And technology can drive us towards that. We can pick the bits that we want to do. Everyone doesn't need to do everything. We are constantly learning so much about how we can be healthier for longer. And hopefully that can also make us happier.
Such a good message. Love it. I've got you've seen so many things. I'm interested in what has you most excited in the relatively sort of short to medium term, next 5 years. What have you seen that you think, ooh, that's happening and it's happening soon?
I actually think in the book, the future of cancer is where my mind is blown by how much things can change and it's incredibly important. But I want to give you something a bit more fun.
I think when we think about energy, because there you talk a lot about accelerated diagnosis.
Yeah.
And I think, when we look at real fatigue, because you can give me a fun one as well, but the cancer one is relevant because that stage between finding something and not knowing what it is, and the certainty between, may that be for breast cancer, a mammography and a biopsy, these windows of time between I think something's wrong with me, but I don't know what it is probably one of the biggest energy drains we see across, all spectrums of society.
Totally. And it's really, really tough. And it's a really difficult time for people waiting and not knowing.
Yeah. So what have you seen in that space?
So this is very much direction of travel.
Yeah.
And I think what we're seeing pulled together in this story of genetics, lifestyle, understanding disease prevalence, understanding the signs of disease early so we can see who is at high risk when, so we screen better. Almost this sort of pyramid model of testing a lot of people in a pretty seamless way.
Yes.
So we're screening that level of the population. And where we're going with blood tests for this, for example, as they become a lot better and a lot cheaper. So we start to recognise cancers earlier where they're a lot more treatable, but also being able to personalise treatment better and understand risk of recurrence better as well. There is so much going on in this area. There's a trial I went to film with last week actually in Southampton for people who have type 2 diabetes are at a heightened risk of pancreatic cancer. And sometimes they may even already have it, but they're just being identified as being type 2 diabetic, when in fact it's actually type 3 diabetes. And is pancreatic cancer. Obviously, this is a very small number of them.
Yes.
But if they do this blood test it's one of these liquid biopsy cancer blood tests by a company called ClearNote. If they do these tests on everybody diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, they can fish out some of those cases of pancreatic cancer early.
Yeah.
This is exactly what happened to my father 30 years ago. He was given weeks to live once they realised it was pancreatic cancer, and that is still happening to people today, whilst most cancer has already seen a lot of advancements. So what they're doing here should hopefully help find much of that cancer earlier. It's still a trial. But there are lots of different ways that they're trying to fish out those particularly aggressive cancers that are found later to be found earlier. There's a lot of research going into colon cancer because the data, particularly in younger people, hasn't been great.
Yeah.
So I think this is a really interesting area because AI is driving us to be able to learn so much. And the impact of that is going to be absolutely huge, that people are going to be able to also have less aggressive, more targeted treatment, which means in terms of that health span, because health span isn't just about keeping you well and not having a deterioration in your health. There's also the after effects of medicines.
Yes.
There's long-term effects that people are having. Averting those is important. And when I was writing the book, this cancer bit probably took half of the time writing the book, albeit it was only one chapter, because it is so important. And I had to absolutely know that I had this right across all cancers, because that's the other thing. There are so many different cancers, so many different variables,
Yes.
and that's why there's so much possibility here. But I spoke to so many people because I needed to make sure that what I was describing was absolutely relevant to all of them, and that this was the direction of travel for all of it. And the sad thing is, it won't be soon enough for a lot of people.
Yes.
But things are set to be absolutely transformed in that area.
I think that's a great message of hope. Now, before I pulled you back onto that slightly heavier one, you were going to give me another one. So
I was meant to give you something fun,
was there a lighter
wasn't
one?
I? Was there a lighter one? I need to think of a lighter one. This might sound weird,
Tell me.
but it's a device to track your activity and everything that you do offline. So this isn't what your wearables do. This isn't what you're putting into your phone or computer.
Yes.
This is more a matter of the conversations you're having and what you're getting up to.
It's listening to everything you say. You're wearing it. You're wearing it. And
You're wearing it.
You.
Yes. I don't know the ins and outs of it yet, but it's just arrived. I'm going to test it. I'm also feeling like, do I have to declare to everybody that I talk to our conversation's being recorded? Not sure, but it's a sort of life logging thing. The idea is our devices are already tracking so much about us. I don't mean our wearables here. Here, I mean our tablets, our phones, our laptops. So what about the bit that they're not logging?
The bit in between. Good Lord. And warn at all times. I've seen a bit on this. And actually, you can then ask it a question. What don't I know about myself that might be worth me knowing?
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
It is interesting.
And I don't know if I want to know the answer to that question.
No.
Because there's some joyfulness in having that ignorance around your blind spots.
Yeah.
Potentially. It's a really interesting... I'm desperate to hear how you get on with this.
Well, I have no idea how it's going to interpret it all, what it's going to make of it all.
Yeah. You can ask it an energy question.
See.
How could I have more energy? And it'll probably come up with a good idea.
I'm going to let you know.
That's a really good one. That is really good. And using all of this experience, if someone is, one of our viewers or listeners is just feeling a bit drained and overwhelmed right now, what message of hope or any guidance you could give to them?
I think the ability to track everything, to truly understand what your body's doing is really powerful in knowing what's going on beyond how you may be feeling. And sometimes you get negative readings, and I accept it can make you feel worse, but it can also reassure you that you're not just imagining it. Today is a day you're struggling with energy. And I do see that sometimes in my readiness score, that some days it will say your readiness is low and it'll give you a reason why. And I'll feel like, well, I want to go to the gym. I don't particularly fancy the cardio today. Today, I think I'm just going to do the weights, and I'll let myself have a day off.
Yeah.
So that data can be empowering.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to accept that we're not that full of energy. And if the technology agrees with us, you may just feel better about it.
I think that's a great summary. Brilliant. Now, I've loved this conversation.
So have I, thank you.
And the book is fantastic. Tell our listeners the full title of the book is Hacking Humanity.
How technology can save your health and your life.
I mean, it's bold and it's true.
It is, and it's an absolutely human story. This is not about the ins and outs of how the AI works, what it's doing in the background. It's the story that I feel really needs to be told about what it means for you, me, and everyone, what we can do to help ourselves, separating science from snake oil, what's truly useful now, what will become more useful in the future. But the future is looking bright, and we should understand why. And I hope the book does that.
It definitely does that. You know, I've nearly finished it. And, you know, I think when we originally met, actually filming a click on BBC,
Yeah.
you know, you've been a master at interpreting how these technologies do democratize and how they make sense to those who this whole thing feels scary and foreign to. So I think it's a great manuscript.
Yeah, well, even my mother responded to it saying, I want to do this test and that test. And
Oh,
she
my
is
God.
very anti-tech.
Yeah.
But it just got her thinking about certain things that you could measure that she didn't know you could measure.
Brilliantly put. Brilliant. Lara, thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Super. Now, if you have found this episode useful, please do follow The Energy Equation and share this episode with someone who you think might benefit from Lara's wide and broad and fascinating insights. Do check out Hacking Humanity. It's fab. Thanks again for your time. Do follow us, and we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of The Energy Equation.